Okay, here we go. We have some notes to finish up with chapter 22, section 1 and 2. Then you're going to take the quiz. Then you're going to watch chapter 22, section 3 and 4. And then we'll take the quiz for that on Wednesday. Then we will review for the test, talk about the essay, and then your test will be on Thursday. Okay, here we go. We talked about Levittown. We talked about the baby boom and what that meant. When we talked about the second baby boom with these numbers in the chart in the early 80s. And what this means is that you're going to have large segments of our population that are going to go through similar experiences at the same time, turning age 6 where you start kindergarten and then passing through those years where you're going from elementary school into junior high and junior high into high school and then high school into college. You have a larger number of individuals becoming parents at the same time, starting families, and then that's where we end up with this second baby boom. But enough with that. We need to move on to some of the technological advances and medical advances of the 1950s, some of which were huge with what occurred. First, you had technological advances. The first computer in the United States was made in the 1950s, and it was called the ENIAC. That's ENIAC. And basically, the ENIAC's job was simply to compute numbers. It did nothing more than that. This computer was ginormous. It took up an area about the size of this classroom, and the transistor bulbs that helped run this computer put off tremendous amounts of heat. So keeping the computer cool, keeping it from burning up was really the biggest task. For its time, it was a huge technological breakthrough. Today, it's something that would move at a snail's pace, but for its time, it was huge. Then there's the transistor itself. The transistor for allowed of a shrinking of technology, and the best example of this is going to be with radios. Prior to the transistor being created, a radio was something not just to listen to music to, get the news, get the weather, listen to soap operas on, listen to sporting events on, but it was literally a piece of furniture because radios were so big. It would function something like an end table, and you could put a glass bowl on it, and you could use it to keep car keys in it. You could put a fake plant on it, something like that. Radios were that big, and then the transistor is developed, and radios now can fit in the palm of your hand. You can have a little lanyard attached to it. You can wear it around your wrist. You can walk down the street listening to whatever it is you're listening to, and it was very convenient for people. And it just spawned a whole new age of other inventions that were to come. But probably the biggest breakthrough in the 1950s, without a doubt, had to be when Jonas Salk created the vaccine for polio. We've talked about polio before. Franklin D. Roosevelt had polio, and polio was something that ravaged and was ravaging the United States in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and the early part of the 50s. There were hospitals that were constructed all around the United States, and their main purpose was to treat individuals that had contracted polio. Polio was to the 20s, 30s, 40s, and early 50s what cancer is to the United States today. You have hospitals around the United States, and their main reason for existing is to try to find a cure for cancer. You have some of the best doctors in this country, some of the best in the world, are trying to find a cure for cancer. And that's what was going on with polio in the 1950s. And polio is similar to cancer in that not everyone that contracted polio was going to be impacted the same. Just like today, not everyone that gets cancer is impacted the same. You have some forms of cancer that if a person gets it, just unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot that can be done, and unfortunately, their days are really going to be numbered. And polio was the same way. You had some people, like FDR, for example, that was impacted greatly. He had to wear metal braces on his legs. He was confined to a wheelchair for the better part of his life um, after he had to go through countless hours of physical therapy to learn how to walk again. Some individuals had to be placed in iron lungs, and I know I spoke to you before about what an iron lung was. When an individual was placed in one, the only thing that stuck out was your head, and it would be filled with air, and that would create pressure, which would put pressure on your lungs, which would cause you to exhale. And then the pressure would be released, and your lungs could expand, and you could inhale. And you basically, because of the paralysis that your body was going through, your lungs had to be worked for you. They had to have assistance until you could start to regain strength. And then lo and behold, here comes Jonas Salk, and he has this. He creates the vaccine for it. And the thing about Jonas Salk is he actually used his own family as test subjects, kind of like guinea pigs. He injected them with the polio virus, and then he injected them with the polio, or first he injected them with a vaccine, then he injected them with the virus, and they did not come down with polio. When that happened, um, there was a small number of individuals then that were were injected with the vaccine, and then when it became obvious that this was working, they could not produce enough of it. Uh, Kids were the ones that were vaccinated first. They were the ones that were most susceptible to it. Because of Jonas Salk, polio has essentially been eradicated from here in the United States. There's a very, very small number of cases that may appear in a given year in the United States. Otherwise, it's basically been eradicated, and it can all be attributed to Jonas Salk and his great vaccine.
The polio virus attacks certain kinds of nerve cells, and for hundreds of years it killed and crippled, especially children. By 1952, Dr. Jonas Salk and his research team at the University of Pittsburgh had developed a killed virus vaccine against polio. The effort to eradicate the disease started small, with Dr. Salk and his team immunizing a few thousand students in the Pittsburgh area. But soon, it became a nationwide mobilization to protect every child against the polio threat. Salk's vaccine and the live polio vaccine developed later by Albert Sabin were effective in controlling the viral disease.
Anyway, like I was saying, shrimp is the
Okay, that does it for your notes from chapter 22, section 1 and 2. So now you're going to take the quiz. After the quiz, then you're going to come back and you're going to get your video lecture from chapter 22, section 3 and 4.